Hey YouTube, Dave Beatty from the Nimitz Encounters. Today I present you the next interview in a mass sighting UFO case from the Navy. In 2004, the crew aboard the USS Ronald Reagan was at sea in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of the United States when they encountered a glowing orange unidentified aerial object above the supercarrier. To date, this sighting has never been explained. Previous interviews are linked in the description. Navy veteran Patrick Gokey was a seaman at the time, right out of boot camp when he boarded the ship. This photo was taken around that time period. As of this recording, the exact date of the sighting is still a mystery, most likely 2004. If you'd like to find out more about this case, check out my article on medium.com. Links are in the description. I can always be contacted at anon at thenimitz-encounters.com or on Twitter. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for updates to this case. More interviews to come. Hey guys, it's Dave Beatty from the Nimitz Encounters. I have a really special guest here to talk to you today about the USS Ronald Reagan encounters. I'd like to introduce Patrick Gokey, who at the time of this encounter was in the Navy, and he was like the rank of seaman when he first arrived on the Ronald Reagan. So thanks for doing this, Patrick. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave.
So, hey, could you just give me just a brief outline of your, Navy career and, when you joined and how you ended up on the USS Ronald Reagan?
Sure. I enlisted in August of 2003. That's when I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. 9 weeks there, followed by maybe another 8 weeks at the A school training in Great Lakes. After that, I moved to my first duty station, which was the USS Ronald Reagan. And at the time, it was in the shipyards in Newport News, Virginia. We stayed there for about 9 months and moved to Norfolk, Virginia for another 3 or 4 months before we actually left Virginia for California.
There's a little bit of different memories about when this event took place. So you're pretty sure, though, that it was your kind of career. You would know when you arrived, and this was in November of 03, you thought, or December?
That's correct. I arrived on board November of 2003.
Okay, so when you first arrived, it was in Newport News, and this would have been actually in a previous video that I did. We talk about a hurricane avoidance cruise that had gone on that previous September. Hurricane Isabel had arrived, and the Ronald Reagan took off out of Norfolk and was out at sea during that period. And then after that, they came back, I think, most likely a little bit later after the hurricane. The people that were living in Norfolk, they said that there was a lot of damage and so on. They kind of remembered that. Some of the witnesses thought that that's when they saw the UFO, but obviously, if you didn't arrive until November, then it couldn't have been during that particular time. So then I saw in some of the news reports that the Ronald Reagan was down in Fort Lauderdale soon thereafter. I believe it was in November. And then the Ronald Reagan went from there to Newport News, and that's where you embarked on the ship. Is that right?
That's correct. I remember getting there right after their Fort Lauderdale trip, after they had got back.
So tell me a little bit about what your job was on the ship, and what kind of training were you doing, or what was your department and so on?
Sure. So I was in deck department. I would have been a seaman at the time. We were mainly in charge of things like anchoring, mooring, underway replenishment, driving the search and rescue boats or captain's gig. At the time when I saw this object, I was just on the regular watch team. And so just staying and watch, either looking for planes or boats, any kind of hazards that you can see. And it was our duty to report everything that we saw.
And so the deck department, do all the people in your department have to kind of do that job once in a while where you stand and watch? And was that like all over the ship, or were there specific places you guys stood watch?
Yeah, we had specific places that we stood watch. We had starboard forward, which is where I was the first time I saw this. We had the fantail, which is toward the back of the ship, which is the second time I saw it. We would have had other watch stations like messenger of the watch, helmsman, lee helmsman, boatswain of the watch, messenger of the watch. If I didn't, I might have repeated that. But yeah,
Mhm.
basically there were, between 7 and 10 watch stations that we could be stationed at in a 4-hour time period.
And I know in talking to Derek Smith, he mentioned that at the time he was actually with another shipmate who was under instruction. In some of these cases, there would be like several people at that particular watch, right? Like on your position, sometimes you'd be alone, or are you always with another person?
No, it really depended. For example, both of these watches, I was alone.
Okay.
I didn't have anyone with me, but it depended if you had somebody that you were training that would have shadow you to the watch stations, or if you're at a watch station where you're on the bridge where there's a bunch of other people. But otherwise, the rest of the outside just watches are pretty solo and boring.
I really haven't heard your take on this other than a brief snippet in uh, Carl Olshak's article on soldiersforthecause.org. I read it there. So, first of all, let me ask you this. Do you remember like specifically when this thing happened?
No, I don't remember the dates at all. All I remember, because it was a long time ago, it would have been in the first year that I had arrived on board.
Yeah.
Um, but I couldn't give you any more details on that.
So I know that the Ronald Reagan ended up home porting in San Diego, and there was a cruise that went from like Norfolk or the East Coast around the Horn of South America, Strait of Magellan, all the way back to San Diego. Do you think that it could have been any? I mean, obviously during that period of 2004, you guys did a lot of stuff. Could it have been even during that cruise, or are you pretty sure it was in the Atlantic?
No, I'm pretty sure it was in the Atlantic during it would have been during one of our sea trials where we just go out for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time, and they run tests on the ship and do, flight ops planning and practice and things like that. I'm pretty confident it wasn't on that voyage over to San Diego.
Okay. In looking at some of the squadrons that were assigned to the Reagan during that time, there were a couple of different ones, and I think I found one that said they were doing flight deck certifications in May of 2004. So this would have been during that what I assume would be called post shakedown availability is after a new ship is brought online, there's this period of time that's they're doing testing and so on. So they were out there in the Atlantic, at that point in May doing flight deck certification. So do you also remember during this sighting that you had if there was any kind of air ops or flights going on during it or before it or?
Yep, there was. I was on starboard forward the first time I saw it, and that was during flight ops. I remember there had to have been at least 100 people on the flight deck itself that saw it. Just because I don't remember it specifically, but during flight ops, you're not going to have fewer than that
Mhm.
necessarily. So I remember there was quite a few people out there. And I remember doing flight ops for most of my watch period. So I would assume during the 4 hours that there was pretty much always, 100 or more people that would have seen this.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm just kind of asking these different questions is I'm trying to correlate different witnesses that have, given me different statements and dates and times and so on, trying to figure out to narrow it down a little bit. Do you recall, before we get into the details of what you actually saw, do you recall like when you first saw it, was it still daylight or was this after dark or?
It was after dark. I don't. It would have either been the 8 to midnight watch or the midnight to 04 watch. I don't which one I don't
Yeah.
remember, but it was dark.
And before, say, if you the 8 to midnight, were you on watch before that? Like, say, whatever to 8 p.m. or you were off duty then?
No, I would have been on watch when this happened. I just don't remember which watch it was. It would have either
Right.
been from
Well,
8 p.m. to.
somebody another watchstander told me that this happened during daylight time and the sun was still out and so on. So I was trying to figure out, well, in your memory, would you have been out there on the deck or out there on the catwalks before your watch? Say if it started at 8, or you wouldn't have even been there.
I would have been, yeah, I would have been on the weather decks throughout the day. That's where we generally worked.
Yeah.
But I didn't see anything, and I
Okay.
I don't remember anything happening during the day.
Okay, well, if you could just give me a play-by-play, maybe in your best recollection of what actually happened
Sure.
during this watch, and I'll just let you tell that story.
Absolutely. So the first thing I remember was standing on starboard forward watch. That's basically we're looking out for any boats or planes, anything that we can tell the rest of the crew about that we got to look out for. So it was very important to call out everything that we see. Even if you think it doesn't make a difference, it's just something floating in the water. You still call it out because you don't know what it is. Um, so first, I was kind of. It almost felt like the sun was rising a little bit. I just saw this orange, bright orange ball, and it was wavy, but somehow still solid, like a plasma almost. And it just appeared over the flight deck, maybe 200 feet off the flight deck. It sat there for about 30 seconds. I remember calling it in. I don't know what my exact wording was. Everybody on the bridge would have been able to see it. But it was this floating orange ball and it sat there for 30 seconds. Um, it didn't seem to move, but we were moving during flight ups. And it seemed to stay with us, but without any movement that you could discern. Um, After that, it just did 3 half circles, just 1, 2, 3, and it was gone. I mean, just in the blink of an eye, it was gone. And so that was pretty weird. And reported it. Other people had reported it. Maybe half hour, an hour later, I rotated watch stations, and I was on the fantail by myself. And the same thing, it came back by us on the fantail, and it hovered, maybe 100 or 200 feet in the air, in the same, maybe the same distance behind it, did 3 half circles, and it took off. And that was the 2 times that I saw it. So then we rotated watch again, and I was on the bridge. I don't remember if I was the helmsman or lee helmsman or messenger of the watch. It would have been those 3 watch stations stand right next to the bosun mate of the watch, where a lot of the action happens up there with our department. And I remember an officer, this was towards the end of our watch, when the news had kind of spread about what everybody was seeing and people were kind of weirded out. And I remember one of the officers on the deck um, ordering someone to take the pages out of the deck logbook, which for me was the most surprising thing, because I was always told in the Navy that whatever you write in that logbook is a legal record and you can't, destroy it, rip it out, anything like that. So that was actually the most surprising thing to me, even more so than seeing this object, just because it was out of the norm.
And did you see it after that point?
No, that was the last time I saw it.
So when you first saw it, you said it sort of appeared. Was it because you kind of became aware of its presence, or did you actually see it arrive?
I didn't see it arrive. I would have if it was going if it was going slower, or even like how a plane would fly by. You can kind of see them and you see the glide and stuff. This was not like that. It was like it was not there, and then it was just there. I don't remember the instant that it appeared. I just remember I saw it.
And when you were on starboard forward looking at it, do you remember if you were you looking up from that position? And is there any sense of scale of how big this was?
Uh, I don't know. I was looking up a little bit. Starboard forward is pretty high up there, so I didn't have to look up too high. It was, I'm not looking straight up at noon at the sky, but I did have to look up a little bit.
Obviously, a light in the skies, it could be very close and small, or far away and big. It's hard to say. I don't know if you had any sense of perspective or how big this thing was.
It seemed big, but because of it was just on the background of the ocean and the
Yeah.
sky, I couldn't really provide a more context for it. But it was a much bigger aircraft or object that I've seen in the sky close up at any point.
One of the investigative techniques that we used to do as field investigators would say, well, if you held a quarter up in front of you, arm's length, was it that big, or was it the size of a baseball, or how would you say, like, if you held your hand out in front of you, how big to your eyes was it?
Sure. I mean, somewhere between a baseball and a softball. It was
So
it was pretty
that
good
big, yeah.
size. Yep.
And then when you were first observing it, you said that it was an orange color, almost like a plasma. So describe the surface. Did you see detail on the surface, or what did that look like?
It it looked like the sun was just close up to me, but without the all the brightness surrounding it. It was the object that I can see on your screen on your monitor right there is what it looks like to me.
Okay.
It was just like a ball of plasma. I remember it being wavy, like there was movement to it, but I don't remember it actually moving, if that makes sense.
Like, I guess I would call this an artistic, rendition of this.
Sure.
And let me see if I can play this real quick. So I added some, surface gaseous kind of
Yep.
to it. And this is more oval shaped. Do you recall if this was similar to what you saw, or was it more round? Or
I think what I saw was a little more round, a little less egg-shaped than you have, and it
here's
wasn't the edges weren't as crisp as you have them. It kind of seemed like almost a very that let's see, that one looks a little bit
yeah, this is more spherical, obviously,
yeah.
and then the edges wouldn't be as defined, more fuzzy edges, you would say.
Yep, that's correct. And you didn't see as much movement around the whole area as you see it, but you could still see like waves, like something, whether it was a field around it or you could see something was moving. But what it was, I just couldn't tell you.
Right, right, right. Okay. So getting back to the shape of the object, you thought that it might kind of resemble maybe the close up of the sun or something like that, a little bit more round than some of the recreations that I created. A couple of the other witnesses said that as well. Some said that it was oval shaped or like a sideways oval. But again, that's all perception. It's been 20 years ago, so it's a
Right, and
little
we're
bit
seeing
hard to.
these from different angles at much different heights and things too.
Yeah. And when you were there, how many people do you think were looking at this thing, if you just had to guesstimate, on the flight deck and all of the people, the watchstanders?
So I can only speak to the first time that I saw it because that's the only time I saw other people, and that I would have to guess between the watchstanders, people on the bridge, the flight crew. I would have to guess an easy 150. And then kind of depending on how the rotations go. When I was on the fantail, you don't see anybody anywhere, so I don't know how many people were on the flight deck at that time. So, but I
S-
would guess at least another 30 watchstanders.
Again, how long did you see it? And you described these three like half circle maneuvers, and were they? I mean, it's hard to just determine the size of the objects to say how big these maneuvers were. But were they rapid? And then did it describe that movement? How fast was it, and so on?
Yeah, it was the half circles that it did were much slower than when it kind of took off. So it would have been like it did 1, 2, 3, and then it just shot off. And
So
it did
like
the same.
it did
Yep,
a
like
it went
just
down, or
3-letter U's. Yep, it went down, up, down, up, down, up, and then it took off. And it did that both times that I saw it.
and then as it took off, like how long before you lost the picture of that?
Less than a second. It was gone before you could believe it.
And did it go straight up or off to the horizon, or?
No, it went off almost like so if this is the bow of the boat here, and like I saw it here, if that makes sense, it went this way. So maybe a 45-degree angle off the bow.
Right. So then moving on from that, you rotated did you go from that position to the fantail, or there was another position after that?
There could have been another position in there, but because I didn't see anything, I don't really remember it. So all I remember was my fantail watch was after the starboard forward watch. It would have been either 1 or 2 hours afterwards.
So let's describe that particular sighting. What happened there?
Yeah, so it's kind of the same thing. I remember back there, it's always really dark on the fantail. So it seemed I noticed it right away when it got a little bright back there. Like, any kind of light when you're in the middle of nowhere, you're going to notice. And it is one of those things that just appeared kind of like it did before. I didn't see it, fly in at an angle or anything. It just kind of appeared and it sat there and followed us for 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It did those 3 half circles again and then took off. And that was the only other time that I saw it.
And you're pretty sure that this was the same object or something that looked almost the same, right?
Yes, I am.
And I know that there was maybe some miscommunication with Carl. He said that his perception was you saw more than one object on the fantail, but I think that what he was, misinterpreting was that you saw one object 2 different times, right?
Yes, that's
Versus
correct. I saw
2.
one object 2 different times.
Yeah,
I didn't ever see 2 objects together at one time. No.
During both of these 2 sightings that night, did you look at the object through binoculars or any type of optical?
Not that I remember. Nope.
Yeah. And while you were there, you said that you report this. Who do you tend to report contacts like this to? Who is on the ship?
So you'll report it to it's the operations department. It's another set of watchstanders that they watch the things like radar and all those kind of things that I don't have a lot of insight into. But it's basically another watch team that kind of records what all the lookouts sees and plots them on their systems, so that way we can kind of go back and forth and make sure nothing's getting missed.
Did they indicate that they actually were seeing, or they don't tell you that? Like when you're reporting it, they're not saying that they are actually seeing it on their radar or something like that? Would you know?
I don't remember if they said it or not. They sometimes will, because a lot of times you'll know these people pretty well because you stay and watch with them pretty often. So they'll say, "Oh, yep, we got that here too. You're fine." At this time, I don't remember what their response was, except I do remember them saying that we see it too, or other people see it too, something along those lines.
So going back to the starboard forward, do you recall if there were air operations going on, and maybe what time you thought that this was probably sometime between 8 and midnight, and were they actually launching planes at the same time, or?
Yeah, they were launching planes at the same time. That's another thing that surprised me was people on the flight deck saw it and they looked up, but they kept doing their job like they're supposed to. But I thought it was very surprising that they didn't stop flight ups, at least for a couple minutes, until this thing went away. Now, I can't say that they shot a plane off right when it was in front of us, but I remember they were doing flight ups before, during, and after it. So it definitely wasn't much of a break in there.
And you were in the Navy doing lots of different missions and at sea and so on. If something like this happened, was it surprising to you that they didn't call general quarters or issue some type of alert? I'm not exactly sure what would happen if an object appeared over the flight deck of an active aircraft carrier. It seems like it would be concerning to the officers. Did they react at all? Did you hear any kind of alarm or anything like that?
No, no, they didn't call general quarters or anything. I would have expected them to do something, but they didn't, and I think that was very surprising. I can't really speak to why they didn't do anything, but I was surprised that they did not.
And was there any conversation when you got to the bridge to your rotation for helm or lee helm? Did you hear anybody else at that time talking about this, or?
No, not really. The next thing I remember when I was on the bridge was that just to take the pages out of the logbook on the deck log. But yeah, I think on the bridge isn't a place you chit chat or anything. You're up there with all the high up officers and senior enlisted personnel, so you're not making small chat or anything like that.
And then after your watch was done and you were back in your area, were other people that were with you then talking about this, kind of confirming that, hey man, what was that, or they saw it too? Did you hear anyone else say that?
Yeah, I remember other people on my watch team saying it when we were leaving, like, oh, that was crazy what we saw, but nobody knew what it was, and because the ship didn't make a big deal out of it, and we got to go back to work at 6 o'clock the next morning, we just kind of let it go and went on our day. It was just one of those things that was kind of unexplainable, and that's where it was left.
one sailor said he was on the bridge and he was in a position of authority on the bridge, and that he was going to write this into his what he called his green book, the log. You may know what I'm talking about, and that his chief told him to rip that out. So this is coming from a person that perhaps you actually witnessed that in real time, and that I heard that story from the horse's mouth, so to speak. There was another watchstander was on starboard forward with Derek Smith, who we have the interview where he describes it. So he was there at one point as well on starboard forward, and this female that was with him corroborates the story. She remembered it a little differently. Both her, and the other guy I just mentioned thought that there were no air ops going on at the time. But again, this could have been during a 4-hour watch. Who knows? There's a window there. She thought that it might have occurred before sunset. So perhaps she was there and saw this thing before, the sun went down. And she described a very similar maneuver to what you just told me, that this like loop maneuver. She said that it shot off into the clouds. It was a cloudy day, she said. And she also said that she remembered calling to top on the headsets, and that they thought that they were messing around at first. Like, I think she used the term, "Are you on crack?" was like what they asked her. And they're like, "You're looking at the sun, right?" And she was like, "No, the sun's behind us." And that was kind of like but she kind of remembered it a little differently. And I think that that's different perspectives. It doesn't mean that anyone's necessarily making anything up. It's just like 20 years ago, and different people remember
could
different
have actually
stuff.
happened on two different watches, because I don't remember almost any of the individuals I was on the watch team with. So they could have easily gotten off, one watch, and I came on to another, and we saw it at two different times.
Right.
It's just, it's too long ago, and there's no way to actually to tell what time it happened.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask, because it hasn't been brought up yet, was has Carl or anybody told you where this happened in the Atlantic?
No, because no one seems to remember when it happened. Carl,
we were in the Bermuda Triangle.
I've heard that several times.
And I remember this because I was on watch, I'm on 1 to 2 watches a day there. And I remember because I was working with the quartermasters, and I had asked one of them, what's going on with all the equipment? Because things were going in and out. And they said, "Oh, well, where we're at?" And I said, "No." They said, "We're in the Bermuda Triangle. This happens all the time." And it did, because we went through the Bermuda Triangle several times over the course of 4 to 6 months, just for different training things. And every time we'd go through there, weird stuff with the electronics would happen. And I remember that we were in the triangle when I saw this object.
So you put 2 and 2 together just because when you were on the bridge, or you were talking about, somebody mentioned that we're in the Bermuda Triangle, because you might not necessarily know.
Right. They don't ever tell you really where you're at.
Yeah.
The only reason I had known is because I knew the quartermasters on the bridge and just asked kind of where we were. And that was their answer.
I know that you were perhaps in May out to sea. Is there any way you can figure out like a timeline between December and May and when you guys then took off to go to home port in San Diego? It must have been between that period, right?
Yeah, it would have had to be between that period. I can go back through emails and stuff. I even kept an old journal. I'll see if I can find it that maybe has more specific dates for you.
If there was like any kind of destroyer escort, or the destroyer squadrons that were assigned to the ship at that time, and it's my understanding that there may have been some other support ships that were there during those at sea things. Do you recall that at all? If there were other ships?
I can't say specifically to that time, but we were never alone when we went out there. There was always some ships, even if we couldn't see them. They were, within distance that they could react if anything happened. That was always my understanding.
So right now I'm just going to show you a 3D graphic I have of the. Hold on a sec. I'm just going to show you a 3D graphic I have of the Ronald Reagan. All right, so this is a 3D model of the USS Ronald Reagan CVN 76 here, and Um, let's talk about the starboard forward. So we're looking at the island here in the middle, right?
Correct.
And then when I can rotate this around. So looking at the carrier, on the right side is the starboard, and then the left is the port, right?
Yes.
So then if I come down to like the island here, oops, let's zoom in here. So the top part up here is going to be the very top windows that you see is going to be the pry fly or the air department is up there at the top looking at the airplanes, and then the middle one is the main bridge, right? That's where the captain and the bosun's mate of the watch and the quartermaster of the watch are all inside that area, right?
That sounds right.
And then where in this kind of model, where would your starboard forward be or whatever?
Yeah, it would have been right here. No, it could just be my memory failing from 15 years ago, but I thought there was one more deck between this area here and down here. I don't remember being on starboard forward, being right next to the bridge and everybody else. I thought I was one deck above it, so approximately in this area.
Yeah, I think
But
that
I also go ahead.
somebody else mentioned that as well, that they thought that it was maybe one deck above that, or
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. I feel like I could always look up at this thing here at that
right, this
ball.
radar or whatever that is.
Yeah.
Like if I come in here, that's kind of a commanding view of the flight deck, right?
Yes. Yep. That's right. That's about the almost nearly the exact view I would have had.
And then can you use your arrow to draw where you saw this thing?
Sure. So from right here, which is kind of where where I'm standing, this would have been, yeah, pretty close to even the size of how it looked from where I was standing.
And so there were airplanes that were actually taking off on the catapults. Like, do you remember that at all? Like while this thing was there, you remembered them taking off?
I remember a plane being right here at the catapult, but it didn't take off while the object was there.
Yeah. And that thing is so front and center. Like everybody that was on the bridge would have seen it, and all these airmen would have seen it.
I remember looking down at the flight deck to see like, oh, are they going to stop flight ops? But they didn't. I remember people that were working on the flight deck looking up.
Right.
But yeah, that was it.
So then when you rotated to your next watch position, it would have been on the fantail, right?
That's correct.
So then where, like, if your memory is of this space right there?
Right there. That's where you stand on the fantail watch. Yep.
Okay, so then I'll clear this and we'll spin around so you can maybe talk us into. I don't know if it's kind
there
of.
There we go. That's a good.
Yeah, that's enough. Like okay, so this is sort of like now you're on the fantail. You see the ocean extended out. Maybe you can annotate like how big it was, or.
Yeah, sure. I would say this one was a little higher up than it was on the when I was on starboard forward and it was above the flight deck.
Yeah.
But this one on the fantail seemed like it was closer to the ship.
Right. So it was bigger in perspective to your position.
Correct.
Wow. And then you saw it do the same U-shaped maneuvers as it took off, and it did like a diagonal as it took away, like not straight towards the horizon, but not straight up, right?
Yeah. So it went kind of. Let's see if I can draw the movement here. So it went down, up, down, over a little bit, up, down, over, up, and then it kind of just took off at an angle. And it was right where it took off. It was, I mean, it was disappeared from the sky within a second. It was super fast.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, I can't even imagine what that was, but it seemed like that little maneuver had something to do with it taking off, right? Because it did that right before it both times. It must be somehow related. Did you come away in all these years changing your opinion about anything or any of this kind of UFO topic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm someone, I usually need to see something to believe it, and had I not seen that, I never would have believed that there were, you know, I believe that there are objects in the sky that you have no idea what they were, but I've never seen them that close and up personal. So it definitely changed the way I look at things. You know, whether or not we can, you know, what we can believe from our government, what stuff the government might be hiding, whether it's just advanced technology or if it's the enemy's advanced technology that they don't want us to know about, or whether it is something from somewhere else. What it is, I can't tell you, but I saw what I saw, and it definitely opened my mind to other possibilities.
Well, I can tell you this, when you talk to 8 or 9 people independently and they all basically tell the same story, it's pretty convincing that you guys saw exactly what you say you saw, and almost everyone to a T described the same object, which I don't know anything in our inventory, especially out in the public domain, that looks like a kind of ball of sun, like the sun, with swirling energy, and I don't know any. I've certainly never seen anything like that. All right, hey, Patrick, I really appreciate your service and coming on and talking about this story with me. Obviously, you're putting a lot out there to come out and talk about this publicly. So I just want to say thanks for this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dave. I'm glad you're bringing this to light, and I look forward to seeing what comes of it.
All right, appreciate it. Numerous Ronald Reagan witnesses have come forward to corroborate this event. I will present these interviews here in the coming days. I'm sure more will follow. New videos can be added to my channel with new information, but I can't replace this video with an updated version. So please check out the channel, subscribe, and look for updates on this case. If you or anyone you know has witnessed UFOs from military, ships, or planes, contact us at the email on your screen. You can remain anonymous.